This nation was founded on the principle that all men are created equal.
We hold these truths to be self-evident.
That all men
are
created equal.
I'll tell you what freedom is to me. No fear. I mean, really, no fear.
Created equal.
Welcome to Created Equal. I'm Stephen Henderson at WDET in Detroit. I'm here with Carey Jr. II. He is the show's producer.
Good morning, Stephen. You ready to talk about some theater?
We are ready to talk about the theater this morning. And I'm going to start with a quote, and I want you to tell me where quote comes from. Is that fair?
No,
or is that
it's
crazy?
Not fair at all.
No, this one's pretty easy.
Gonna embarrass me on the air, Stephen.
It's a very common quote. What's past is prologue. It's something we say all the time, right? That what's going to happen now or in the future is something that
we're
has
not all
before.
literary nerds, Stephen. I don't know where this is from.
It's from a play by William Shakespeare called The Tempest.
Okay.
And
that makes sense.
It's one of just hundreds and hundreds of common quotes, I think, that are part of our everyday language and exchange that come from Shakespeare. And in many cases, I don't think we even know that's where they came from. Like people don't know that's why we say that.
That's fair.
But his mastery at turn of phrase and the way he could so artfully capture the human condition through kind of poetic phrasing is the reason that, hundreds of years after his death, he is still
very relevant.
Very relevant in school curriculums and all kinds of places. And today we're going to talk about Shakespeare and what he means here in the city of Detroit.
Yeah, I may not be a Shakespeare connoisseur, but I did dabble a bit in high school in the theater space. And so I was a little bit of acting, not too much.
I didn't know this about you, Carey.
A little bit. I did a couple years at
you were on
U of D.
stage?
I was on stage, small roles. But like you said, there's one element is the story itself. There's the way that the actors on the stage present the story, but then there's the language that's entailed and how that language elevates other parts of this story about the performance. And like you said, I think Shakespeare definitely stands apart from a lot of the playwrights that we hear about in the way that he has written his story. So it'd be interesting to hear this conversation about how these stories that Shakespeare's written are going to be depicted in the city of Detroit, because these two great guests have done a lot of work at making that happen.
Yeah. So we're going to talk with Sam White, who is a director and educator, and she is the founder of Shakespeare in Detroit. She is also going to be the director of the staging of Romeo and Juliet at the Stratford Festival in Ontario this summer. That's going to run from May through October. Also with us is Antoni Cimolino. He is an actor and director, and he's the artistic director of the Stratford Festival in Ontario. He's been with that festival for 36 seasons now. We're also going to want to hear from you, the listeners. Tell us, how much do you think about Shakespeare? Do you love the Bard? Do you go see Shakespeare in Detroit? And do you have favorite quotes from Shakespeare's plays? Call and tell us. We're going to get started in a second.
Got to make up for me.
Sam White and Antoni Cimolino, welcome to Created Equal.
Thank you. Thanks for having us, Stephen.
Yes, it's wonderful to have both of you here. So Sam, I'm going to start with you. Tell me a little bit about the beginnings of Shakespeare in Detroit, how you came up with this idea, and why it was so important to you to stage the Bard's plays here in the Motor City.
Well, Shakespeare it's always been a part of my life since I was 8. My mother gave me the complete works when I was 8 years old because it was punishment for listening to Salt and Pepper. That's another story for another time. But the play started to resonate with me the older I got. And eventually, back in 2008, I was actually living in Las Vegas trying to be a stand-up comedian, living in a motel called South Cove Motel on Fremont Street. And I went to the Utah Shakespeare Festival, and they have a lovely festival in Cedar City. And I thought, if they can do this in the middle of the desert, why can't we do this in Detroit? And so fast forward a few years later, because it took some time, Detroit was undergoing a lot of change with the automotive industry, not doing too well in 2008. But by 2012, I went to Tech Town to build a business plan. And a year later, found some funding, $3,000 and a bunch of favors from some of my fellow actor friends. And we did Othello at Grand Circus Park. And that was 3 weeks after the city filed for bankruptcy. So we didn't know if anyone would show up, right? Because the art museum, the DIA at that time, was going to liquidate Picasso's and Matisse and all of that. And so we didn't know if there was space to create another art, infrastructure in Detroit. But we did. We had the audacity to show up 3 weeks after that bankruptcy filing, and 500 people showed up to the park. And so we knew that live theater, shared experiences, and people from Canton to Canada, 7 Mile to Southfield sitting together was essential for the health of our great city. So we did it.
Wow. So talk about the I guess the moment of that. I mean, this idea of Shakespeare outdoors in the city of Detroit at this very pivotal moment for the city, as you say, talking about having filed for a municipal bankruptcy, but also the fact that this is the largest majority African-American city in the country. The idea of Shakespeare here, in some ways, I guess, maybe to some ears, rings with discord. Why did it make sense to you?
Yeah, because, no matter where you are in the world, Detroit included, we're all just, doing the best with our humanity. So whether it's, King Lear and those of us who have been caregivers and dealt with a sick parent before, and insurance and legacy and all of that, we can certainly relate to that story. Or if it's Othello and you're, dealing or coping with racism and gaslighting, you can relate to that, and also, with Romeo and Juliet, being able to have the freedom to love who you want. It doesn't matter who you're from, what city, town, continent, state, we all can relate to those things because they're the core of our shared humanity. And so I knew that, I'm not the only Black person in the world who likes Shakespeare. So I knew that if I liked it and my mother enjoyed it and we had an affinity for the stories, that other people would too. I was actually shocked that no one else had done it before, right? And so because no one had ever done it before, it was a big void in the city, and I just decided to fill it.
Yeah. So you're talking about how all these plays, these stories, kind of resonate with things in our own lives. For me, my favorite was always Julius Caesar, which I think teaches you more about politics and intrigue and loyalty than almost any other play that I can think of. And what a match with the city of Detroit, right? I mean, if you talk about a place where politics and intrigue kind of marry each other, that happens here all the time.
Absolutely. And that was definitely the case in 2013, right?
Yes.
During the mayoral race, right?
Yes.
When Mike Duggan was first running for mayor. And so it's Shakespeare, people try to fight it sometimes, and there's these eternal conversations about the relevancy of Shakespeare, but I think they're investing too much in who the man was, and he's been dead for a really long time. So when I create Shakespeare, I'm not thinking about the man as much as I'm thinking about the stories, and those are the things that are still alive and well, not the person.
Yeah. Antoni Cimolino, I want to bring you in the conversation here. You're the artistic director for the Stratford Festival in Ontario, and you guys are staging Romeo and Juliet with Sam White as the director this summer. Tell us about that.
Well, Sam has directed a beautiful production, Stephen. It looks gorgeous. It is so well acted. There's outstanding performances in it. And, Romeo and Juliet is a story that appeals across all time. It was written by a young writer about young people who look around at the world their parents have created and wonder how we screwed this up so badly. And so it's poignant. It constantly reminds us that our values, which, you know, in the play show that the grown-ups are more concerned with money than happiness, more concerned with status than the welfare of their children, probably could have been written today.
Yeah. So the idea of having Sam be the director of that play at Stratford, talk about that, an African American woman.
Well, Sam sort of came on my radar years ago because I'd heard about Shakespeare in Detroit, and I thought, wow, that is just so entrepreneurial, as well as I love how much she loves Shakespeare. I mean, it's a pleasure for us to nerd out together and just talk about the plays, and you know. And then in 2018, I worked with Sam. She worked with me on a production of The Tempest, the play that you quoted earlier in this interview, when Martha Henry was playing Prospero. And we had a wonderful time together. And then the pandemic happened, which, you know, sort of separated all of us. And a couple of years ago, Sam directed Alice Childress's The Wedding Band here at Stratford. And I asked her to take on that very powerful play. And I'm very happy to report that just a couple of days ago in the New York Times, there was a shout out for Sam because they had a listing of who was nominated for a Tony and who should have been nominated for a Tony. And they listed The Wedding Band at the Stratford Festival, directed by Sam White. Yeah. And of course, it couldn't be nominated for a Tony because it wasn't on Broadway.
Right.
But clearly in that reviewer's mind, it should have been.
Yeah. So Sam, tell us how this falls on you, this opportunity to bring Shakespeare to Stratford.
Well, first of all, dream come true.
Right? Just a little thing there, right?
Let's start there. And you know, it's so I'm so intentional about the places that I spend time. And I have to say that one of the reasons why I've been able to, because this is my third season at the festival, I've come back 3 times, is because of the kindness, the mentorship, the belief in me that Antoni has, which frankly, I mean, just to be transparent, I've never had that in my career before, where someone gives me not only, you know, mentorship, but gives me resources. You know, that doesn't always happen, specifically for Black artists, even more specifically for Black women who are in the performing arts, where I get to direct Romeo and Juliet on the largest stage at the festival, an 1,800 seat house, you know, in the festival theater. And I have 3 stage managers. I have hundreds of people backstage, you know, working on the show. We have a cobbler, a milliner. That never happens. First of all, it's rare for that to happen to anyone in North America, but for it to happen to me is really life-changing. And it really has opened my eyes to what's possible. And so I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be able to work at my highest potential, but I'm only able to do that because the Stratford Festival has given me the resources to do so. Because oftentimes with Black artists, it's not that we're not talented, it's not that we're not capable, it's not that we don't have ideas and big vision, it's that we don't get the resources.
You don't get the opportunity, right, exactly.
Right, and so I have, you know, the ability to perform at my highest level because the Stratford Festival believes that I can perform at the highest level.
Yeah.
And that's life-changing.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to continue talking with Sam White, the founder of Shakespeare in Detroit, and Antoni Cimolino, who is an actor and director and the artistic director of the Stratford Festival in Ontario. We want to get going with you, the listeners, on the phones and on social. Give us a call. Let us know if you've gone to see Shakespeare in Detroit. What did you think of it? What do you think of the idea of Shakespeare right here in the middle of the Motor City? Are you a Shakespeare fan? Call and tell us about your favorite plays. Call and tell us what your favorite lines are from Shakespeare plays. I always feel like that is the thing that sticks in your minds, this wonderful wordsmithing that he did to tell these amazing stories. 313-577-1019 is the number here on the phones. That's 313-577-1019. You can also go to Twitter and hashtag Created Equal or at WDET. We'll be right back with more Created Equal. How poor are they that have not patience? What wound did ever heal but by degrees? Yes, this is Created Equal, and I'm Stephen Henderson, and I am quoting Shakespeare on the show. That line was spoken in Shakespeare's play Othello by Iago. We are talking about Shakespeare and Shakespeare here in the Motor City. We're talking with Sam White, who is the founder and executive director of Shakespeare in Detroit, and with Antoni Cimolino, who is the artistic director of the Stratford Festival in Ontario. Sam White will be directing a version of Romeo and Juliet at the Stratford Festival this year. We're talking about Shakespeare, how much he still moves us, how much his words still mean in our culture. Also talking about the arts and theater, accessibility in the arts and theater, how Sam White, an African-American woman, has been able to make her way through theater and the arts, not just here in Detroit, but around the country. We want to hear from you as well. The listeners, give us a call and let us know if you've gone to a performance of Shakespeare in Detroit. What did you think of it? How did it make you feel to kind of escape to that time in the middle of the Motor City? Also, give us a call and let us know which Shakespeare speaks most to you. Is there a play that is your favorite? Are there lines that you remember from those plays? Tell us which ones stick in your mind. 313-577-1019 is the number here on the phones. That's 313-577-1019. You can also go to Twitter and hashtag Created Equal or at WDET, and we can include you that way. Sam, I want to talk a little more about your journey and how the theater landscape has changed in terms of racial diversity and equity during that journey. Tell us what it was like when you were young and first thinking about this whole idea of being part of American theater. How many doors did you find kind of just closed to you because you were African American, because you were a woman?
Well, I think when I was a little kid, I never really my dreams were so expansive and my imagination was so big. I didn't know that there were doors, but of course I grew up and learned that there were. When I was an actor, I mean, most of the time I had smaller roles. I was never like the star of any plays that I participated in. I was a maid a couple of times, or I was in the sort of ensemble for most of the things that I did, which is probably why I eventually became a stand-up comedian. Because when you're a stand-up, it's just you and a mic, So I was always sort of the featured, star of my content, that I created on my own. And as far as theater was concerned, though, I think it was, I always saw people that looked like me. Like if we went to the Fox and saw, say, The Wiz, or if we went to, say, a play at the Fisher Theater and we saw Ragtime, then I would see Black people there. But most of the times, whether it was in professional theater or in academia, when I was coming of age, I never saw Black people doing Shakespeare. Never. Rarely. And if I did, they did play sort of the smaller roles, or like, spear carrier number 20, or the maid or servant in some play. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to start Shakespeare in Detroit, because, Detroit has a fine training facility. Wayne State and the Hillberry have always been nationally and even internationally recognized for their training program. And so I thought, so what do people do after they graduate from there? Right? There's really nowhere for them to go, specifically in the classical space. And so it's been an honor, a pleasure. And I think my responsibility as somebody who is from Detroit, born and raised, and also enjoys classical theater, again, to fill a void that was pretty large for a long time.
Yeah.
And even still, I don't really think that much has changed, Stephen. Unfortunately, I'm still hopeful, and maybe we can follow up in 2030, but Shakespeare in Detroit, I'm still the only founder that is Black founder and still leading an organization in Detroit. And so I'm excited for a time when we don't just see Black people on stage in the city, because the city is still predominantly Black. I'm excited for when you can pull back the curtain and see Black producers, more Black directors, more Black, costume designers. And that hasn't happened yet, but obviously I'm hopeful because I continue to work and create in this industry.
You were talking about kind of the struggles that actors have getting cast in major roles in productions. Does that look different from, I guess, the barriers that you encountered as somebody who wanted to do your own thing, right? Who just decided, well, this is the right space for me, and I'm going to create it for myself. I mean, is it easier on that end because you're taking control of things, or do you encounter some of the same kinds of hurdles as a creator?
I think, I'm an eternal optimist. I want to say that. And I fight for my optimism, because you have to, I think, if you're from 7 Mile in Detroit, because the city has been through so many changes, and I've been able to sustain my optimism because I love my city. I have to say that first and foremost. It's such a big part of who I am. But yes, I think, because when I started Shakespeare in Detroit, I mean, I was only, barely 30. And so I was young, and also, I think people aren't used to a Black woman asking for, 6 figures to do a play.
Right. Right.
So the same sort of barriers and challenges, and now I try to look at them as opportunities I experienced as an actor. Now I experience them as a producer, because most producers do not look like me. And that stands true even on Broadway, and so, it's still an uphill battle, but thank goodness I'm from 7 Mile, because I have the toolbox
right
to be able to climb that hill.
You get pushed down, you get back up and run a little faster, right?
That's right.
I do want to talk about the way that you stage the plays here in Detroit, the fact that they're outdoors, and the casting that you do, and how creative it is. I mean, as you point out, it is somewhat unusual still to see African Americans cast in major roles in Shakespearean works. It's not that unusual in Shakespeare in Detroit.
Yeah, it's I love our work. I'm so proud of it. We're 11 years old this year, so we've been at it for a while. What's exciting about our work is we sort of specialize in site-specific work, which means that we don't believe that you have to have a brick and mortar space to be considered a theater, right? Because theater is giving this gift of live performance to the community. So we've always gone where the people are, rather than having the people come to us, whether it was Antoni and Cleopatra at Recycle Here, which was the original Lincoln Motor Company and is now a recycling center, or the Frederick Stearns Historical Mansion, where we did Henry V. We always try to celebrate the infrastructure that already exists in Detroit, and again, bring our shows to the community. And so, since we're bringing our shows to the community, it's important that the players reflect the community as well. That's why it was also really exciting for me to direct Romeo and Juliet this year at the Stratford Festival, because the stage inside of the festival theater is so unique. It's really a beautiful, one of a kind thrust, where we didn't need much of a set, because the stage is so beautiful, the theater is so expansive, and I had the experience of doing site-specific work where you can just use humans to create a world, right? There's nothing impeding the story between the actors and the audience, which is the way it should be, right? Which is the way I think Shakespeare would appreciate it, that way. And so I think all of my work in Detroit has really prepared me for this moment at the Stratford Festival. And our cast here in Stratford, because I'm still in Canada working, is inclusive and beautiful like the world around us. And so that just happens innately, when you're I think a melanized person. I don't even think about it. It just
Right.
It's just something that happens because that's what the world looks like to me.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea. The sense that if we read these plays, because of our ethnic background, we see some of the characters as African American, which clearly they were never imagined that way by the author. But because all of us bring to literature who we are, for us, the stories maybe always seem different than they might for other people.
That's right. And then in Shakespeare in Detroit, we're in schools during the school year. And sometimes when I visit classrooms, the kids call me Shakespeare. They have no idea. they have no idea that William Shakespeare was this person from, Stratford upon Avon, more than 400 years ago. They think, as far as they're concerned, that the way that they were introduced to it was from me or from Shakespeare in Detroit, which is the same for me. I still hear Shakespeare in my mother's voice. And so that's part of making it accessible for people.
Yeah. Yeah. Antoni, I want to have you talk about the theater that Sam is referencing at Stratford. For listeners who've never been there, it is an unusual space. Talk about how all of that, I think, elevates the staging and the production and the performances at the festival.
Well, Stephen, the start of the Stratford Festival was very unlikely. I mean, we're in the middle of farm country here in southwestern Ontario, and it's a beautiful area. But it really started because Tyrone Guthrie, who was our founding artistic director, had this idea about creating this stage which is like Shakespeare's stage. It's an open thrust stage so that the actor and the text are right in the middle of the audience. And that kind of stage didn't exist since Shakespeare's time. I mean, when they closed the theaters in 1649, we no longer had that kind of stage. We had the kind that we're all used to, which is at the end of a room, you've got a stage, and you light that, and it looks like a picture box. And the effects of that kind of stage are mostly visual. It's about trying to look as much like television and film as possible. And Shakespeare creates those images through his language. He creates the surroundings all through his language. So the beautiful thing about the Stratford Festival stage, which really revolutionized particularly the performance of Shakespeare, because suddenly you could speak simply, you didn't have to declaim, you didn't have to be bombastic, you could just be in the middle of the audience and talk to another actor like a real human being. It made Shakespeare very much our contemporary. It made it so that Shakespeare didn't seem fussy. And so that stage kind of spread around the world. Minneapolis, the Vivian Beaumont in New York City, the Mark Taper Forum in LA, the Olivier Theater at the National Theater, the Sheffield, Chichester. These stages cropped up around the world specifically to support the presentation of Shakespeare. And you were talking about outdoor theater, and Shakespeare in Detroit has been doing that work, and of course, all of Shakespeare's plays, except for about the last 4 or 5, were written for outdoor spaces. So, a play like Hamlet, which examines, with such nuance what it means to be a human being and to have the kind of self-doubt and to go through life's journey, that was written for an outdoor space. And so these plays are intended to be as open, as simple, as accessible as possible. And I think we should take a real cue for that, for what we do in the theater writ large.
Yeah. Talk about at Stratford how you confront some of the things that Sam White was talking about in terms of the challenges, getting more people of color, opportunities and access in the theater. As she says, in some ways things don't look dramatically different today than they did many years ago. How does that play out there in Ontario?
Well, Sam referred to the fact that it's all of a piece, like that it's not simply about what's on the stage, but what's behind the stage, producers, designers, and audience, of course. And so we've really examined everything that we're doing, from how we, reach out and develop talent and support talented individuals, be they designers or be they actors or directors. We've also looked at the programming that we're doing, and we're doing a much wider spectrum of human experience. This summer, for instance, we have a beautiful play on called Salesman in China, which is about Arthur Miller. It's a historical fact. Arthur Miller was asked by an extraordinary actor in China in the 1980s to come and stage and direct Death of a Salesman. So the play is 50% in Mandarin, 50% in English, an extraordinary company of actors. And we're reaching out to many different communities in as many ways as possible, in as thoughtful a way as possible. And I see that as being, driven by creating better art, because if everybody in the audience comes from a certain neighborhood, they're only going to laugh at certain jokes. Like the audience needs to be as diverse as possible, and the talent pool needs to be as diverse as possible to ensure we're really developing the very best.
Yeah.
So it's artistic. It's also, of course, financial. Like in reality, every theater needs every supporter they can find.
Sure.
And especially now after the pandemic. So this is about creating the theater of tomorrow, and we are seeing changes, and I'm very excited about that.
Yeah. Sam, talk about the sustainability, I guess, question as well. When you started Shakespeare in Detroit, did you think you would be able to sustain it as long as you have, and how have you been able to maintain that kind of support for something that I think a lot of people would say, how could you do that? How could you do that in a city like Detroit?
Did I believe that I could do it at first? No, Stephen, I didn't. I mean, if I'm going to be honest, I had a business plan that I created at Tech Town. But I'm not sort of living my life, or my career isn't based on anybody else's blueprint. So it's really hard to be able to predict my trajectory. I will say, in the past maybe 2 or 3 years, now that people are seeing me sort of working at the Stratford Festival, I do think that people at home might take me more seriously. It's really interesting. But the thing is it's not that I have any more sort of talent, or I think I have the same skill set I had when I started Shakespeare in Detroit 11 years ago. But the difference is, again, you have to have somebody see you and value you and appreciate you. And for me, that person was Antoni Cimolino, right? Like, because you can have the most talented person in the world, but if somebody doesn't open a door for you, then you're not able to, again, produce at your highest levels. So I think now that I've started working at the Stratford Festival, we've sort of gotten the attention of a couple more foundations who support Shakespeare in Detroit. But it's still not easy. And again, being transparent, there's newer organizations that are not produced or led by, people of color who have been, given more resources than Shakespeare in Detroit. So I'm aware, I'm not, I'm an optimist, but I'm not silly. I understand. I understand that no matter what I do, some people, not everybody, but some people might judge me by, what I look like. So it's my job. And, my dad was a factory worker and my mother was a stay-at-home mom. So, and they're no longer with us. It's my job to just remember all the things that they taught me about life, about Shakespeare, about my abilities, and to hold on to that and to make sure that Shakespeare in Detroit is here for our 20th anniversary. I know the theater company won't always be run by me. Eventually, founders do not need to run their own organization.
Absolutely true, right? You gotta plan for the future.
That's right. And the thing about, I'm not a historian or an archivist, I'm an innovator. And I understand that being an innovator means that you have to set the organization up for the next person who can take it into the future. And so I'm excited at this point in our journey at Shakespeare in Detroit. That's what we're doing now, is preparing the organization for whoever will run it in the next 3 to 5 years. And that's really exciting for me because I didn't know this would happen. But now that I know that it is possible, I can get it ready for the next Black woman who will take it to the next level.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue talking about Shakespeare and diversity and the city of Detroit with Sam White and Antoni Cimolino. So far, no takers on my solicitation for callers here. I'm surprised, Detroit. No one wants to talk about Shakespeare the way I do. Give us a call. Let us know if you've seen some of the performances by Shakespeare in Detroit. Let us know if you're a reader of Shakespeare's plays. Do you have a favorite? Also, do you have quotes from Shakespeare that stick in your head, things that have kind of helped you understand life and politics and love and all the other things that he wrote about? 313-577-1019 is the number here on the phones. That's 313-577-1019. You can also go to Twitter and hashtag Created Equal or at WDET. We'll be right back with more Created Equal. I came, I saw, I conquered. Yes, it is Created Equal, and I'm Stephen Anderson, and I'm still quoting Shakespeare. That's a line from Julius Caesar, one of the more important treatises on politics and intrigue, written by William Shakespeare and performed many times around the world. Of course, that's what we're talking about today here on the show. We've got two great guests with us. Sam White is the director or the founder of Shakespeare in Detroit. She's also going to be the director of a staging of Romeo and Juliet that is happening at the Stratford Festival in Ontario this summer. That's going to run May through October. Also with us is Antoni Cimolino. He is the artistic director of the Stratford Festival in Ontario. He's been with the Stratford Festival for 36 seasons now. All right, before the break, I chided the audience a bit about not calling to participate in my exploration of Shakespeare here. And of course, they have responded in remarkable fashion. That's one of the great things about our callers here on WDET is that they are listening. I want to start getting to some of them. Let's start with Wardell in Jefferson Chalmers here in Detroit. Wardell, welcome to the show.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. I've had the occasion to see some of the plays at Grand Circus Park a few years ago, and it was just a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
Being there and seeing that. And then as a poet myself, I get a chance to get out around the city, open mics or special readings on that. And sometimes those are outdoors, so it's something special about being outdoors, and especially, spring and summer and fall.
Yeah. Yeah. Wardell, what play did you see at Grand Circus?
Now I think about it, Romeo and Juliet, or now to get down to the specifics. Now I had to really think about that, but I knew it was Shakespeare. It was Shakespeare in the park.
Yeah,
and I saw a couple of the plays, but just to pull out the specific things about it, I can't really do that right now.
Yeah. No, Wardell, I love that you called, though. And I remember them performing in Grand Circus Park as well. Sam, talk about that venue. That's such a great space here in Detroit. And it's kind of, I always feel like the shape of Grand Circus and the feel of Grand Circus is kind of like a theater anyway, right?
That's right. It's I love Grand Circus Park. It's the first time we performed there was our first show was at Grand Circus Park, Othello, and we came back with Romeo and Juliet, A Midsummer Night's Dream. I love that park because you're sort of you get a big hug from the architecture of Detroit, right? Because you're right off Woodward.
Mm-hmm.
You're right across the street almost from the Fox Theater. The Opera House is just around the corner, and so it's a beautiful place to be able to present Shakespeare. So you get the stars as a backdrop, but you also get to celebrate Detroit's rich architecture. Because I do think that Detroit has some of the grandest architecture in the world, and so We love that part. I'm so happy Wardell saw something there.
Right? He saw something there.
Saw something.
Right. Wardell, really appreciate the call. Let's go next to Ron in Detroit. Ron, welcome to the show.
Yeah. Thanks for putting this show on, and thanks for saying, people better call in, and that made me want to call in. I haven't been to a Shakespeare in Detroit production, but I will now. I'd like to ask the director there, how do you decide, which play to put on? Like, what goes through your mind when you think, what would I like to do next? And, my favorite Shakespeare play is Macbeth. I'm not sure what that says about me, but I wonder what is the favorite play of any of you and why?
Yeah. Great question, Ron. Sam, I'll start with you telling us how you choose the plays that you guys perform at Shakespeare in Detroit, and then tell us what your favorite is. Then I'll go to Antoni, and then I'll say what my favorite is.
Sure. I usually let the space tell me what show makes sense for it. Like with Antoni and Cleopatra, the space chose that play because for most of our costumes, we repurposed whatever the community was recycling. So we literally got inside of the trash bins and the recycling bins to get the resources for the costumes and the set. And so we were thinking about sort of how cars were manufactured there, and so we wanted to manufacture a show and celebrate that space by repurposing some of the community's things. And we thought, Egyptians were pretty innovative. They could take things that never existed before and create them for others to enjoy. And then Romans, who we sort of made them more traditionalist, so we didn't have them in recycled or repurposed costumes. It's usually the space. It's usually the space, and there's a story behind it. My favorite play right now is Romeo and Juliet. I mean, and it's not just because I'm directing it.
That's what you're working on. So
I'm working on it. But when I was 8 and I first received the complete works from my mom, I didn't really understand what was happening in the plays, but I knew that Romeo and Juliet were young like me because they had parents who told them what to do.
Yeah.
And so Romeo and Juliet is my favorite because of my history with it.
Antoni, what's your favorite Shakespeare?
Well, I'm at the other. Sam is right. She loves Romeo and Juliet. It's really a pleasure to talk to her about it. And she was so enthusiastic and has been about this production. That was an early play of Shakespeare. I'm at the other end. I love The Winter's Tale. It's such a beautiful play about second chances and forgiveness and falling back in love again.
Wow.
And so it's one that has a special place in my heart. But, when you're programming these plays, as Sam said, you look for opportunities so that if you think you have a special person for a given part, there's an opportunity there and you want to seize those opportunities. As artistic director, I also have to sell tickets. So at this moment, I want to say that Sam's beautiful production of Romeo and Juliet is playing in Stratford, Ontario until the end of October.
Yes.
And don't miss it. It's a beautiful indoor experience with that great thrust stage. But what Sam has done, and you can hear it right here. I mean, she's just a volcano of talent and is, brilliant.
Yes.
You're going to love the production. So Come see what she's created.
Yeah. So my favorite has always been Julius Caesar, which we had to read in high school, and that was the first time I read it. But being kind of a junkie of politics and somebody who was always interested in government and power and things like that, I just think it's a masterful sort of exposition of all of those things, and so that one always stands out for me. Really appreciate the call, Ron, and the questions. Let's go next to Caroline in Detroit. Caroline, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Stephen. Thank you so much for the show. I'm a director and a producer. I'm with Good Light Productions out of New York City, and we're scaling to Detroit. And I want to say I'm so grateful for Sam White and for Antoni And my favorite play, by the way, is King Lear, which I saw at Stratford 30 years ago. I was expecting my first child, and I don't remember the words as much as I remember the magic that was created. It opened with an empty stage, and within seconds, the stage was dressed, and the story was on. And I was captivated from that moment on. I haven't been back to Stratford for 30 years. I'm coming back because
you gotta go now.
I'm coming back, and I'm bringing that child I was expecting. She was in utero, and I hope that I get a chance to shake Sam's hand and Antoni's hand, and I'm looking forward to doing work together in Detroit with Shakespeare in Detroit.
That's wonderful. That's right. What a wonderful story. Caroline.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for the call. Let's go next to Dee in Farmington. Dee, what's on your mind?
Hello,
hey
everyone.
Yeah.
My favorite quote is from Hamlet. Let's see. There's the respect that makes calamity so long-lived. For some reason, anyway, I always remember that one. We memorize different parts in high school, and of course I memorized Hamlet's soliloquy that and still say, there's the rub. One time I said that in college, one professor, he was floored. He was like, "Oh, you like Shakespeare?" And so it brings people together. And if my daughter needed to, say a speech, and then I just said the soliloquy. She was floored. She was like, "What? Really? Okay, I can do that too." And so I'd really like to know more about the Shakespeare in Detroit and be able to attend. Details, please.
Dee, I really appreciate the call. Sam, do you want to talk about 2024 Shakespeare in Detroit? We've got a couple minutes left.
Sure. Well, we actually have a TYA performance of which is Theater for Young Audiences of As You Like It. It's playing right now at the Detroit Institute of the Arts. People can go to shakespeareindetroit.com to learn more about that performance and what's coming next. So stay tuned. And I want to encourage Detroiters to take the trip across the bridge or across the tunnel to come see Romeo and Juliet. You know, it's your hometown girl, born and raised on 7 Mile. She's made it to the Stratford Festival. The show, it's not just Shakespeare, because I think sometimes people, they sort of get stuck in their tracks when they hear the word Shakespeare. It's a beautiful storytelling about humanity, and how the decisions of adults impact children, which is happening right here and right now. But it's also entertaining. It's music, fashion, dance, and some of the biggest, baddest fights by Anita Natoli, one of the best stage combat choreographers in the business. So please come over the bridge and support the show. This has never happened before. No one from Detroit has ever directed at the Stratford Festival. And so if you want to see history in the making, come see Romeo and Juliet. You're going to have a great, really beautiful time, I promise.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about Romeo and Juliet is how much it does, right? How many different kind of things in the culture it pulls on and kind of pokes at. It really is just a sprawling story, and I agree with you. It's the fighting in it is one of the cool elements of it, right? How you depict that and how you stage all of that. It was really great to have you here with us, Sam, to talk about your work here in Detroit and at Stratford, and Antoni Cimolino, also really great to have you with us. Thanks to both of you for joining us on Created Equal.
Thanks, Stephen. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Stephen. Hope to see you this summer in Stratford.
Yes.
Come and have a glass of wine with Sam and with me.
Yes. All right, so Carrie, you're going to go out now and buy all of the works of Shakespeare and read it, right?
I don't know all the works, but I might go see the show in Ontario. Did you have fun?
That. Yes,
I
did
enjoyed
have fun.
Yeah, I could see that you were lighting up here in the studio.
I love shows like this where it's something a little unexpected, I guess, on Created Equal,
it was
but
fun.
Something I have real interest in. And Sam is such a wonderful Detroiter and artist.
Well, I'll say this may have changed my perspective on Shakespeare.
There you go.
I don't know a lot about Shakespeare now, but we know what we are, but not what we may be.
Ah, there you go.
We'll end on that.
He's quoting. That's right. All right, that's going to do it for us on Created Equal. Created Equal is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University.